Guests, ladies and gentlemen,
Record.
before we start commence the program, and here are the following webinar protocol. For each participant ID, please use your real name following with your origin of institution. All of participants are expected to mute the audio and only unmute the video during the event. We cordially invite you to take your own firm and comfort seat in your own room and please avoid the backlight. Make sure that you have a good and stable internet connection. If you have an earphone or headset, we recommend you to use it so that your voice can clearly and loudly to be heard. During the Q&A discussion session, all participants, please use the chat box to deliver the questions. Thank you for your cooperation and consideration.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Guest Lecture Series on SDGs today, Tuesday, 25th of May 2021. I am Oriza from ITAS Global Engagement, and I will be your Master of Ceremony this afternoon. Thank you for joining our Guest Lecture Series on SDGs today. Before we start our agenda, let me inform you of some important information for today's event. First, please fill your attendance at bit.ly/attendance_GLS SDGs. Our committee also sent the attendance link in the Zoom chat room. For participants who wish to get an e-certificate and stamp, please fill the attendance 15 minutes after the session starts. Second, participants who wish to ask questions during the question and answer session, please send your questions to intip.in/Q&A/GLS-SDGs. The link for asking questions is also sent in the chat room. Or you can ask directly by clicking the raise hand feature. Ladies and gentlemen, this guest lecture series on SDGs is dedicated as a form of appreciation and commemorating the 60th anniversary of the Institut Teknologi 10 November Surabaya. Today's guest lecture brings the topic of green materials for clean energy and storage and green materials for electronic applications that will be delivered by our honorable speakers, Professor Dr. Darminto from Institut Teknologi 10 November Surabaya and Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin from the University Malaysia Perlis. And today's lecture will be moderated by Dr. Fahmi Astuti from Institut Teknologi 10 November. Before we start our agenda, allow me to deliver our schedule today as follows. First, opening followed by short remarks. Second, introduction to moderator. Third, lecture session by Professor Dr. Darminto. Fourth, lecture session by Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin. Fifth, question and answer session. Sixth, certificate awarding followed by the closing. Next, before we go into the core of today's event, I would like to humbly call on to Dr. Astria Nur Irfansyah, Senior Manager of ITAS Global Engagement Office on International Partnership, to give a few remarks to officially start today's lecture.
Thank you very much, Ms. Oriza, for that kind introduction. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone, or good evening to us all. And my name is Irfan. So on behalf of the ITS Global Engagement, So it is our honor to welcome our distinguished speakers, Professor Darminto from ITS Surabaya and Associate Professor Muhammad Mahidin bin Ramli from UNIMAP, our good friends. Yeah. The topic today will be green materials, and Prof. Darminto will talk about green materials for clean energy and storage, while Professor Mahidin will talk about green materials for electronic applications. So I personally believe this is a very interesting topic for us all. So and also to all participants, from the committee, we would like to thank you for joining and participating in our GLS events. We hope you enjoy the talk so far, and this talk particularly, we hope it will be beneficial to us all. And I think that's all from myself. Good. I hope you enjoy. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you very much, Dr. Irfan, for the kind remarks. Now, before we proceed to the next agenda, let me introduce our moderator. Dr. Fahmi Astuti completed both her bachelor's and master's degree in the Department of Physics at Institut Teknologi 10 November Surabaya and attained her doctor's degree in condensed matter physics at Hokkaido University. Also, she is currently a lecturer at the Department of Physics, ITS. Her expertise is in condensed matter physics and was granted the opportunity as visiting researcher at RIKEN, Japan. Now, without further ado, let's proceed to the main agenda. To the moderator, Dr. Fahmi Astuti, the time is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, MC, for your kind introduction. Okay, so today, as you know, here there are already some participant or audience attending today's seminar, and today is Professor Darminto from ITS Surabaya, and the second speaker is Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin bin Ramli from University Malaysia Perlis. Okay, so before we listen to the presentation, so please let me read the curriculum vitae from the speaker. So for the first speaker, Professor Dr. Darminto will deliver the topic about the green materials for clean energy and storage. So here is his curriculum vitae. So he completed his doctoral degree in Institut Teknologi Bandung, Indonesia in 2000 and he completed postdoctoral program from the University of Twente, the Netherlands, in 2001 until 2003. Also, he is now a lecturer in the physics department of Institut Teknologi 10 November, and he was also an executive secretary in Board of Trustee, ITS, from 2016 to 2021. He was also a Vice Rector of Research, Innovation and Partnership, ITS, from 2011 to 2015, and also a Director in the Institute of Research and Community Services, ITS, from 2011 and 2000 until 2015. And he was also project director, JICA, Japan International Cooperation Agency, in 2012 to 2014. And the expertise of Professor Dr. Darminto is superconductivity, magnetoelectronics, 2D, and nanomaterials. Okay, so that's the curriculum vitae from our first speaker. So to save our time, for Professor Dr. Darminto, time is yours.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fahmiastuti. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon and best wishes to all. First of all, I would like to thank the ITS Directorate of International Partnership for the opportunity for me in this GLS SDGs this afternoon. First of all, on this lecture, we choose topic matching the theme number 7 of the SDGs, and part of this research is in collaboration with the group of Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin bin Ramli from UNED, Malaysia. Thank you very much, Dr. Ramli, for your participation. Let me share my slide. Is it already seen, or my slide?
Yeah. It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. This is the overview of my lecture before we enter the discussion about the green material, energy, and storage. Let's take a brief look at the word energy need and the renewable spirit, along with the depletion of non-renewable energy reserve as in the introduction. Let me start with the introduction. As we all know, in the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, there are 17 themes or issues. Theme number 7 deals with the affordable and clean energy. In daily life, the most practical availability of energy in the form of electricity, unfortunately, there are a large number of this world population who are still constrained for the electricity access. This condition is getting worse as an implication of the COVID-19 pandemic, where electricity has become very critical for the priority of health facilities. On the other hand, the world community has realized that the depletion of non-renewable energy, so that the energy needs must begin to be converted with the renewable one. Until 2017, renewable energy distribution is approximately still only around 17%. Of course, we all hope that this conversion will continue growing along with the shortage of fossil-based energy sources in the future. Currently, people have utilized renewable energy from water, wind, sunlight or solar energy, and geothermal. Electricity generated by wind and solar energy has evolved from the use of large-scale centralized grid to smaller scale for household need. Since the wind only blows at time, as well as the solar energy only during the day, these two types of power sources require a storage system for the use when it is needed. Let us have a look at the distribution of renewable energy used in the world, consisting of bioenergy, with the green one, water or hydro energy in the blue one, wind and solar in every continent, respectively with the yellow and violet. It is seen that Asia has installed more than 700 gigawatt of renewable energy, and it is becoming the largest of any component. What about the Indonesian? The government has targeted conversion to renewable energy from 7.7% in 2016 to 23% in 2025 and to 21% in 2050. As we also know that developing renewable energy plants is currently not cheap investment. So it requires long-term strategies to build on a large scale. For example, solar power plants have been built in several areas outside Java, like North Sulawesi, West Nusa Tenggara, East Nusa Tenggara, Bali, and the near future is in Lampung. This installation have its around 5 megawatt. We will continue also in the wind power plant with the capacity of about almost 8 megawatt has also been constructed in South Sulawesi, and some of which have also been planned in the number of areas. Okay, next we will continue discussing biomass and carbon compound as a green material. As we all realize, Indonesia as a tropical country has ordinary biodiversity in the form of forests, plantation, agriculture, and other land cover vegetation. This wealth of biological resources is equivalent to the almost unlimited availability of sustainable sources of biomass. In this case, biomass can be in the form of as well as the bio-waste. As an example, it can be seen here that typically tropical plants, including the palm cultivar, such as Borussias flabellifer, Cocos nucifera, Aringa pinnata, and Nipa rustica. All parts of these plants, with their trees, leaves, fruit, and their waste are potentially beneficial. All biomass, in principle, composed of hydrocarbon molecules, so it can be converted into carbon compound. Several conversion methods can be illustrated as in this diagram. Thermal conversion require heating at a temperature under various conditions, whereas chemical conversion requires enzyme or microorganism. The thermal method can be through a pyrolysis process, this one, which is heating an inert gas atmosphere like nitrogen or argon. Next, the hydrothermal process requires water or liquid around a critical state at the temperature of several hundred Celsius at a certain pressure. In this process, subcritical or supercritical state can be selected. At last, the simplest process is combustion, like this. In this diagram, it illustrates the hydrothermal process with the choice of liquefaction, gasification, and carbonation method, respectively producing bio-oil, gas, some gases, and also biochar or biocharcoal. In short, biomass can be converted into carbon compound and can then be functionalized into material for energy, like solar cell, and energy storage system, like battery capacitor or supercapacitor. In more comprehensive scheme, this is a description of the application of carbon compound as renewable material. This application involves energy harvesting system, energy or gas storage system, and renewable chemical. Nowadays, in the world of infrastructure and building, the use of material and the application of management system based on an environmentally friendly principle has been developed, which are called green facilities, such as green fort, green airport, green office, green station, green housing with detailed characteristic like this. This one. It is originated from the architecture from the interior design and building design. Based on this green nature, we can adopt this terminology for our carbon material or compound to become green carbon. Let us take a closer look at the existing form of type and carbon compound. This is an allotropy of carbon, which includes graphene in the left-hand side, one layer of hexagonal carbon arrangement. This is the like a honeycomb for a bee. And then nanotube, a graphene roll to form a tube with a nanometer size here, and fullerene, a graphene roll, a combination of pentagon, this is the 5-side, and hexagon, 6-side, one structure forming a sucker-like structure, a structure like a ball for the football game. And next, diamond, a tetrahedral carbon structure, and graphite, the stack of graphene layer like this, forming 3-dimensional structure. In addition to the order piece, like graphene here, there are also structure of carbon compound with disorder arrangement. This carbon group are hard carbon, soft carbon, and activated or active carbon. It appears that hard carbon has the largest pore or cavity here because of this empty space here compared to the another piece of disordered carbon. In commercial graphene, is currently made of graphite, which is mining as a non-renewable material. Theoretically, graphene has a perfect atomic arrangement and almost no defect here. Although this is not the case in practice. Usually, if you buy graphene, it is not as perfect as this scheme because probably in some point, in some location of graphene layer, there are many defects and also impurity. Graphene can be oxidized, by touching oxygen and hydrogen like this to form graphene oxide. This so-called graphene oxide. There are oxygen atoms here. And furthermore, if the oxygen is reduced into the graphene oxide, now we have reduced graphene oxide. Apart from creating the crystal defect, there is also a distortion of the hexagonal, like this one. It is no longer hexagonal with the defect side here, also this one. So it means that it contains many defects and distorted structure. As a consequence, RGO gives rise to more attractive physical properties like electronic, electrical, as well as the magnetic properties. Another carbon compound that does not have an ordered structure is amorphous carbon. In this ternary diagram, amorphous carbon can be composed of sp2, which is the sp2, meaning that this orbital S, orbital p, with 2 electrons, and sp3, hybridized orbital, and also a carbon hydrogen in the right side. The dominance of the sp3 bonding gives an amorphous carbon here, which was a diamond-like structure like this. And while the dominance of sp2 leads to a graphitic like graphite structure, amorphous carbon is generally composed of this bonding structure. This is the diamond for the sp3 hybridized structure, and this is the graphite or graphitic structure for the sp2. Okay, our study here has started from the biomass of the palm oil plant, in this case, coconut shell. At present, it seems that both coconut product and its waste have been used up. One of them can produce biochar as a carbon compound like this. This is a glance of the carbonization process of coconut shell containing constituent like this, the original coconut shell contains cellulose, lignin, pentosan, water, and so on. And if you convert this coconut shell into the biochar, and we can result in a product. This is the powder. This is in the form of solution, and this one is the thin film or film. This is the product of our carbon compound. Further analysis demonstrates the elemental content of the biochar produced look like this. Thermal analysis is required for further treatment if necessary. You can take some temperature range to make a heat treatment if you like to convert and to try and seek another phases of this carbon compound. Next, the phase analysis of carbon compound of biochar with heat treatment, varying temperature, and holding time produces a single phase with the two diffraction peaks in the XRD spectra at an angle 24 and 43 degree, which indicate a compound similar to reduced graphene oxide like this. These two peaks and 20 something and almost 44, 45 degree of the diffraction peak. To differ from RGO made of graphite from mining, we would like to call it as a green RGO like carbon. So this is, we add some, this one is the green reduced graphene oxide. Okay, the microscopy of this carbon compound, according to the SEM and TM, so that the sample looks like a seed, even though it has not sound in a thin layer impressing the graphene compound. It can be concluded that in this point that the graphene-like seed consists of several layers as illustrated like this. It is a single layer graphene. There's the several layer and thicker graphene layer. And our sample is considered to be still like this and not yet like this. Confirming the microscopic data that the sample is seed-like sound by the Raman spectra like this, whereas addition to the graphene peak G and the defect peak G, this one, also two-dimensional structure peak. This one for the hexagonal structure, and this is for defect, different from the hexagonal like this, and this is the 2D character of our sample. Based on the sample size distribution like this, it can be seen that the existing sample saw a size about 4 nanometer. This one, the D samples, GPS P2. This one, showing that the smallest thickness of about or consisting of 5 to 6 layer of graphene, layer 6 to 5 layers of this kind of hexagonal structure. Okay. The same method has applied for the Palmyra trees product. We move from the coconut shell to the Palmyra product. You see that in our community, this is called by Siwalan. This is Palmyra tree products. All part of this tree have been fully utilized in several areas in Indonesia, like East Java, East Nusa Tenggara. There are a lot of Palmyra sugar product we have used. It is a similar way to the coconut shell, but it started with the sugar product to be converted into biochar with carbonization. This one is the Palmyra fruit and the milk, and also the drink, and also this the brown sugar. So this bioproduct or waste can be converted into the carbon-based material. The result of carbonization, so biochar, which has an amorphous phase according to the XRD spectra. The starting material used here, you can see that this the coconut sap, this the Palmyra sap, palmite wine, and also brown sugar. All sample shows there's almost the same pattern of XRD spectra, and this is the impurity phase coming from the product, which is very common detected from the palmite family. And we can make it disappear by rinsing by water, and it's like this one. There's no peak of the potassium chloride here. Okay, so this is the carbon powder from the coconut sugar, and also from the sap, yeah, and also from the sugar itself. And you may convert this powder into a liquid by adding some to be solution, and also coated on the substrate to become a thin film. Well, furthermore, the amorphous carbon sample from brown sugar contain around 63% of sp2, meaning that is the gravitic phase or graphenic phase, and 22% of sp3 is the diamond-like carbon structure, and other in the rest. It means that the amorphous sample is dominated by graphene bond, like this one, sp2 bonding. Okay, this is the main part of our research. Let's continue with the example application on the energy and storage. We have tried to grow the film from carbon solution in two methods, namely the spin coating. This one is spin coating, and also nanospray. This is the simple way to make or to fabricate the film using the solution of carbon. The results show that the grow process with the nanospray produce a thinner and more homogeneous film with the fine grain in nanometer, in 100 nanometer scale. You may compare with this one, the film fabricated with the spin coating. The thickness of film is become much thicker than this one, and also the grain is much bigger than this one. So coating with nanospray, it is recommended than using the spin coating. Additionally, we have also added nitrogen here, and also boron as the dopant to create the N-type and P-type semiconducting material, like usual silicon, germanium, gallium arsenate, and so on. Based on the potassium analysis, in 3 samples grown on an ito-coated glass substrate, bonding between carbon and nitrogen, like this one, carbon and nitrogen, and also carbon and boron is created in the sample. The doping result also slightly changes the electrical conductivity and also the electronic band gap of the sample. As we compare with the same conductivity for the amorphous silicon, this value is more than 10,000 times higher for the amorphous carbon. Next, we have fabricated a PIN junction where it's layered with the thickness of about 300 nanometer. You can see here. And after irradiation using the EM 1.5, the short circuit current and open circuit voltage can be detected. It is considered to be too small. However, this at least shown the photovoltaic effect can be detected from the device. This is a PIN junction made of all amorphous carbon film. This is very rarely reported before. Of course, further development is extremely needed in the future, especially for enhancing the efficiency to be practical application, including the implementation hybrid of amorphous carbon silicon or other material. Now, we move on the application for energy storage system. The first is a supercapacitor. You can see here that the graphenic-like carbon from coconut shell need to be exfoliated. It means that it's divided into the much thinner layer than before. To increase its surface area by injecting some glucose like this one, or hydrocarbon with the short length molecule by either glucose or acid during the process. Besides, graphene sheet require increasing the development of the dielectric constant by attaching positive or negative ion like this, like iron, nitrogen ion, oxygen, and also chlor ion. So if we can increase the surface area, this one, and also the dielectric constant, this one, you may expect that you will have high specific capacitance. And this is the sample morphology of resulted exfoliation. And from the IV curve measurement like this, so the capacitance can be estimated, and the specific value of this material is around 100 farad per gram. This capacitance can still be enlarged by further exfoliation and substituting any other cation or anion on the graphenic sheet. The recent report, the capacitance is exceeding more than 300 or 400 farad per gram. So I think our sample is still quite far away to go to enhance the capacitance. Well, now we move to the lithium-ion battery. Today, you can commercially buy lithium-ion battery, which are currently growing to be widely used. Generally, this battery uses a cathode in the form of lithium ferrophosphate, LiFePO4 crystal, as a source of lithium ion. Although this cathode is superior among the available material choices, some obstacles are still faces. by this cathode material, including the low electrical conductivity and also low rate capacity like this. To solve this problem, we have tried to add graphenic carbon by means of mechanical ultrasonication. As a result, the carbon sheet appears, this carbon, to connect a number of adjacent LFP grain here and form a conducting bridge like this. And consequently, in addition to increasing electrical conductivity, it also increases the electrochemical performance. You can see here, this is the percentage of carbon from 0, there is no carbon, 5, 10, 15, and so on. It is seen that the conductivity is drastically increases as the carbon content increases. But for the electrochemical, it increases, and then by the point at 15% of carbon, it then decreases. So this is for the best percentage of carbon can be added to the LFP material as a cathode of lithium-ion battery. Okay. We are sure that lithium-ion battery is getting stable in the market, but since lithium is more limited in availability naturally, researchers are trying to replace it with sodium. The comparison between these two alkaline elements is as follows. The most important factor of this comparison is that the performance of sodium as the electrode component of the battery is not better than lithium. You can compare all of the aspects, except this will certainly reduce with this one, the abundance in the earth crust. This is a big number times than the lithium. So this will certainly reduce the cost of battery manufacturing in future. In addition to that, for large-scale power station application, it is clear that lithium will be very expensive. Instead, sodium will be a challenging option. We are presently in the progress of in the initial state of studying the utilization of locally available material, such as salt, source of sodium, iron, this is the salt of iron, and then phosphate rock in the source of phosphor, and also coconut shell in the sort of carbon. The serious challenges ahead are how to purify this starting ingredient. That's the big challenge for us. Okay, finally, in the past 5 years, dual carbon batteries have been developed in Japan and the US, employing carbon electrode and the electrode solution containing lithium ion and phosphorus fluoride. In accordance with this reaction, you see that charging is to right. This is the charging from this one, and the positive electrode and negative electrode. So its reactions take place in its electrode. Reflecting on the sodium on ion battery, it is possible to try various biomass-based carbon compound as a dual electrode and replace electrolyte solution containing lithium ion to be a sodium ion. Okay, all right, we are arriving at the closing note. This is the closing note that in principle, we can convert the biomass into the carbon compound and then can be functionalized as a energy and storage material with the interesting and abundant available in, especially in our country. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Okay, thank you very much for Professor Dr. Darminto for a very nice lecture. Yeah. So the main point of Professor Darminto's presentation is how the green materials, especially from plant, from nature, can be employed as clean energy and storage. Okay, so maybe later for the audience, if you have question, you can drop your question through the link provided in the chat box, or later you can maybe directly raise your hand and directly ask to the speakers. But before the discussion session, so the next agenda for today's seminar is the lecture from the second speaker. So yeah, the topic which will be delivered by the second speaker is about the green materials for electronic application. Okay, so before that, please let me read the curriculum vitae from the second speaker. Our second speaker is Associated Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahyidin Ramli from University Malaysia Perlis. He completed his doctoral degree from the Advanced Technology Institute, University of Surrey, UK. And for the master degree, he completed his master degree in the Microelectronic Design Department of Microelectronic University College Cork, Republic of Ireland. For his professional experience, he is a coordinator for Microfabrication Laboratory and Failure Analysis Laboratory, School of Microelectronic Engineering, UNIMAP. And he is also senior lecturer in the School of Microelectronic Engineering, UNIMAP. He was also project manager, Nanorian Technologies, Malaysia. And he was also a coordinator for Industrial Networking and Quality Management, School of Microelectronic Engineering, UNIMAP, and also was a researcher in the University of Surrey, UK, from April 2008 until April 2013. And for his expertise is his expertise are synthesizing carbon nanotubes, graphene oxide, synthetic graphite, nano devices, including gas sensors, biomedical sensors, solar cells, flexible and transparent electronics, organic transistor, etc. Okay, so let's listen to our second speaker's talk for Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahyidin. The time is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Dr. Fahmi Astuti, as our moderator today. And I think let me share my screen first. Okay, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera. Basically, my name is Muhammad Mahyidin Ramli from Center of Excellence Geopolymer and Green Materials. Basically, I'm doing my research in our Center of Excellence here. And then I'm doing my teaching in the Faculty of Electronic Engineering Technology in University Malaysia Perlis. Before that, I would like to take this opportunity basically to thank the organizer for inviting me. And then I wanted to basically congratulate all the committees for having this kind of session that we call a guest lecture series. And then basically we're looking on the Sustainable Development Goals, or we call it SDG. For my particular topic, I will talk about reduced graphene oxide for electronic applications. In some way, as been said by the moderator, my title is basically green materials. So we believe that reduced graphene oxide, because we produce our reduced graphene oxide from oil palm trunk, from oil palm tree waste. So we believe that the graphene that we get basically is green materials because it's coming from the biomass waste. And then we will look at into the electronic applications, and to be precise, basically what we are targeting to address the SDG number 3, which is the good health and the well-being under the sustainable development goals. Okay, so basically, by now, basically, most of the researchers, and I believe most of the participants, they listen to what been said by Professor Daminto before. And then by now, I believe that they already know what is graphene. So basically, graphene, we don't have to introduce graphene because graphene has been there since 2004. Okay, so basically the graphene is discovered by one researcher from University of Manchester, the physician by the name of Andrew Geim, and at that time his student is Konstantin Novoselov. So from 2004 up until now, there are a lot of research have been done on graphene, and there are a lot of applications that trying to utilize the graphene. Okay, they're trying to utilize the graphene. So just a bit of a introduction. Again, this already been explained by Prof. Daminto before. There are three, we call it a crystal structure that we have to differentiate when we compare between the graphene and the graphene oxide and the reduced graphene oxide. The only difference is by we are basically attaching the functional groups on the basal plane of our graphene. So when we get a stack of graphite materials, so basically there are graphene there. Okay, by exfoliating each of the layer from the graphite, stack graphite, so we can get a monolayer of graphene or even bilayer, or some of the researchers, they call it a multi-layer graphene. Okay, and then when you attach the functional groups by oxidation method, you can use conventional oxidation methods, or you can use sophisticated oxidation methods, where we can basically attaching functional groups. So for example, we have a COH here, we have a C double bond O here, and then we also have a OH, CO, for example. So by attaching there, so basically we are changing the properties of our graphene. Okay, so when we come into some of the applications where we have to get rid or we have to detach back the functional groups from basal plane of our graphene oxide, so we have to do what we call a reduction process. So this is just a bit of properties when you compare graphene, the graphene oxide and reduced graphene oxide. So for electronic applications, these are basically the properties that we have to look into. The first properties is the electron mobility, especially this is important, especially when you wanted to do semiconductor devices, for example, a transistor, where transistor is the most important devices in all electronic applications, all electronic devices, your mobile phone, your laptop, your TV, and so on. So most 100% of the electronic device, they must have the so-called transistor. So that is very important when you're trying to play around, or when you're trying to enhance the properties of your graphene here. Okay, so it says here that at the room temperature, this is the value of the electron mobility. Okay, and understandably, when you attach your functional groups on the basal plane of your graphene, the electron mobility will drop, because the functional groups there, basically they disrupt the network conjugation, okay, inside your C double bond C in your hexagonal lattice of your graphene. And then also we look at into the surface area. This is particularly important when you apply gas sensor application, for example, where you wanted to attach, where you wanted to detect as much as gas molecule as you can. Okay, so when you can attach, when you can attract as much molecules, gas molecules as you can, so you can increase the sensitivity of your gas sensor. That's why it's very important. And then next one is the thermal conductivity. Again, important, especially in the thermal management system. And then carbon to carbon bond length. And then we have the specific capacitance based on the cyclic voltammetry. Again, it's differ from graphene oxide and reduced graphene oxide. And the most important thing is the electrical conductivity. So if you look at here, based on theory, the electrical conductivity of graphene is basically a lot higher if you compare with gold. So we all know that gold is the best conductor in the world, even that been beaten by graphene. And then we look into the sheet resistance, how well or how good or how bad our materials, in this case is graphene, can resist the electron mobility from point A to point B. And then we have the wetting capability. So when researchers across the world, they are really doing their research, they are really focusing on the graphene because of, as I said before, because of the properties of graphene. For example, the flexibility, the tensile strength, the antibacterial properties, the ability to absorb the white light, and then the transparency, high surface area, and the high conductivity. So these are basically all the potential applications that we can pursue, that we can investigate into. And some of the applications are already been researched. Some of the applications are already been investigated, and some of the applications here already in the market. So these are basically the potential applications, basically from graphene. For example, here we have a device where it can measure the anxiety and the stress. And then here we have a printable wireless sensor. Okay, a printable wireless flexible sensor, where basically we use this type of sensor in order to extract the data that we can get from your sweat flow. Okay, so basically when we look into our sweat, there are a lot of information that we can extract. For example, the temperature of your body, the body temperature, and then we can extract also the sodium level, the level of your sodium inside your sweat, and then from there we can know the health condition of your body. So all of this, including the sensors, including the circuit, including the substrate, are basically flexibles. Okay, so in order to have this type of flexible sensors, so we need to print our circuit on top of a flexible substrate. Again, we use graphene. Okay, so basically we use a graphene, and then we formulated our graphene solution to make it as an ink. So basically we have a series of ink solution. For example, we have a silver, and then we have a gold ink solution, and then we have graphene ink solution. So if you compare with these three type of ink, so basically a graphene basically give you a best result if you compare with gold and silver. And then here, this is basically have been commercialized, where we have so-called the graphene biosensor. So basically, this type of sensor, we have a biochip inside here. So this is the biochip, biosensor chip, and then we put a biosensor chip inside the reader. So in the middle of this biosensor chip, basically we have a graphene as an active material. So this is this biosensor or these devices basically will detect the drug level inside your blood. What do you mean by drug level here? Drug level here. So drug level means that if you have a new disease that we don't know yet, for example, we take, for example, based on the current situation, is a COVID-19. So we don't know yet what are the vaccine, what are the medication, how about the dosage, the concentration of the drugs that we wanted to have inside our blood. So this biosensor, these devices basically will determine in terms of the suitable drugs and in terms of the dosage required for that particular disease. And then finally, we have a graphene in order to utilize the best thermal conductivity. So if you look at here, the thermal conductivity of graphene is more or less is 3000 watt over Kelvin, millikelvin basically. So this is extremely good if you compare with amorphous carbon. Okay, so that's the reason why one of the mobile phone company, they apply the graphene inside or at the back of their mobile phone as a thermal interface material. And then this is just a recent findings. I think I already shared this kind of slides before, I think last year, in December. But again, this is a good example how researchers trying to make use of good properties of graphene. Okay, so what they did in Korea, if I'm not mistaken, yes, in Korea, basically they use graphene as an active material. So if you look at here, this is basically a silicon substrate, okay, based on the silicon substrate. And then they have three terminal devices that they call a field effect transistor. It is type of three terminal devices transistor where it will give an effect based on the electric field. Okay, so once they deposit graphene on top of their sensor, on top of their silicon substrate, so they use a biomarker and the linker. So this is a biomarker and this is a linker. So this biomarker basically are used in order to attract or in order to bind with the COVID-19 virus. Okay, so each of the virus, basically they have a unique binding energy with different biomarkers. Okay? So means that if COVID-19 virus, they can bind with only certain biomarkers. So this type of biomarkers can only bind with COVID-19, and then they bind these biomarkers with the linker, and this linker basically act as a link between graphene and the biomarker. Okay, so how they do it? Basically, they have the graphene sheet on top of a field effect transistor devices, and then they do the surface functionalization with the linker. Normally, it will be a metal nanoparticle, either aurum, silver, or any other metal nanoparticles, act as an linker, and this linker is further functionalized with a biomarker. So this biomarker basically will attract or will detect the COVID-19 virus. So once they already have their transistor, once they already have their sensor devices, the next stage should be how to determine the changes made into their devices. Okay, so this is how they do the investigation. This is how they determine whether their sensor are sensing or binding with the COVID-19 virus. Okay, so if you look at into here, so this is basically current changes before the detection and after the detection. So in order to make sure that their device can be repeated, so over the time, starting from 0 second up until 400 seconds, they have successfully recorded the current changes starting from low concentration of COVID-19 virus up until highest concentration of COVID-19 virus. So I would say that they have successfully detect the COVID-19. Okay, so as I said before, these are basically the potential application. But again, if these are, this slide and the previous slide are the potential applications, the question is, do we already have the commercial products based on the graphene? Especially when we wanted to address the SDG number 3, which is the health and good well-being. Okay, so in order to answer that, or in order to answer that kind of question, whether we already have a commercial product based on graphene or not, so we have to look into the, what we call it, Graphene Technology and Innovation Roadmap 2019. So basically this roadmap being done by EU country, and then they basically establish one scheme that they call a graphene flagship. I'm sure that because in Malaysia we also have the graphene roadmap, and I'm sure that in Indonesia they already have the graphene roadmap. But what I wanted to highlight here is the electronic applications together with the targeted years before we can have the commercial product based on the graphene. For example, here we have two types or two devices or two products under the electronics application. Okay, and then they targeted basically just next year, we should have a commercial product based on the low cost, the printable electronics. All the product that I've shown you before is basically what we call it just a prototype. None of them are basically been commercial yet, except the thermal management system by Huawei, except that. But the rest is still in the prototype stage. So they are targeting basically the graphene roadmap. They are targeting 2022 to have the low cost printable electronics. And then by the time of 2023, we should have the high frequency electronics and the flexible devices. One of the example of flexible devices, as I shown you before, where we wanted to detect the heart rate, the body temperature, and then all the information from your sweat. So we call it a physiological sensor. And then by the time of 2030, we can have a spin logic devices. Okay, so this is basically the available products on market. Okay, available product on market. For example, as I said before, we already have the smartphone where they try to make use of thermal. And then we have transistor, and then we have the photo detector, and then we have a smartphone, but this one for the touch screen application. Okay, and then we have a lithium battery, where we wanted to make use of the chemical structure of graphene. Available products on market. This is just a roadmap, and this is already a products that been market. So means that some of the product here, they are ahead of time. Okay, some of the product here, they are ahead of time. So what we do, basically in our lab, in our research, basically we also team up with Prof. Daminto Research Group. But we trying to make use of the oil palm trunk from the oil palm tree in Malaysia. So if you look at into the hectare rate here, means that how big oil palm industry in Malaysia. So basically we are producing yearly in average around 70 to 100 kiloton per year in terms of the waste. So what they do with the waste, basically they just burn it, or they try to make use of the waste into a low quality applications. Okay, so that's the reason why we wanted to use the oil palm trunk, and then we have managed to turn the oil palm trunk waste into the graphene. Okay, yeah, 70 to 110 million metric ton per year produced last year. So it's a huge. So those waste basically are made up by oil palm trunk, oil palm frond, empty fruit bunch, the fiber, and palm kernel shell. So what we did, we tried to turn oil palm trunk waste into the synthetic graphite first. So if you look at here, this is basically the diffraction pattern. We use the SRD in order to compare with the commercial graphite. If you look at into the peak here, which is around 26 to 28 degree. Okay, so if you look at the peak here at 20 degree in terms of the heating rate, and at 10 degree in terms of the heating rate at 500 degrees C. So if you look at into the literature, there are a lot of synthetic graphite being produced from biomass waste. Most of the production, basically, they are applying a high temperature. So what we are trying to do here, we are trying to lower down the temperature, and we managed to get 500 degrees C with 10 and 20 degree per minute in terms of the heating rate. So if you compare the synthetic graphite that we produce from oil palm trunk and the commercial graphite, it's almost identical in terms of the peak there. And then in terms of the Raman structure, in terms of the Raman spectrum, this is basically our synthetic graphite that we produce from oil palm trunk, and this is commercial graphite. Okay, again, if you look at into the GP, even though the ratio for D to GP is very high, that is understandable because our graphite is a synthetic graphite. So the defect is quite high if you compare with the commercial one. But the G peak there, the graphitic peak there, if you compare with the synthetic graphite, is almost identical. And then we did some scanning electron microscopy images, and here is the images for the commercial graphite, and these two are basically the images for our synthetic graphite at 500 degrees C with 10 degrees C per minute and 20 degrees C per minute. Okay, And then we did further characterization, but this time with the FTIR, where we wanted to see the commercial graphite, the comparison with the comparison between the commercial graphite and the synthetic graphite in terms of the functional groups there. Okay. So once we get the synthetic graphite, so we further exfoliate. So basically, there are a lot of method or technique that you can use in order to produce the graphene. So the method that we choose is a chemical exfoliation using our own recipe. Again, we basically use a strong oxidant in order to have the oxidation process happened. And then basically we attach our functional groups on the basal plane of the graphene in order to get the graphene oxide. So if you look at into the AFM images here, and I look at the number there, so the thickness of the graphene oxide that we get is around 1 to 1.4, 1 to 1.4 nanometer. And then when you look at into the FE SAM, we have some of them is a monolayer based on the thickness, and then some of them is a bilayer, and the rest is a monolayer. If you look at into the FE SAM here, so some of the sheets overlap into each other. And then we did the TEM, the transmission electron images, microscopy images, where we have some of the layers there is folded. For example, here, folded. Some of the layer here is very thin layer, which is less than 10 nanometer. And then some of the area, which is here, is more than 1 nanometer. So we believe this is more than one layer. And we presume this is 3 to 4 layers because the thickness is around 5 nanometer. And then for our graphene oxide, we did the Raman spectrum, and then we compare with the commercial graphene oxide. This is a commercial graphene oxide. And this is the graphene oxide that we produce from synthetic graphite from oil palm trunk. And then finally, we did the comparison between the graphite before exfoliation and after exfoliation. This is commercial graphite, and this is the graphene oxide that we get from our synthetic graphite. Okay. So once we get the synthetic, once we get the graphene oxide, so we have to reduce, we have to get rid of the functional groups on the graphene basal plane there, because most of our applications based on the electronic applications. So we have to tailor-make our graphene oxide into the electrical connectivity that we wanted to have for that particular application. For example, here, so basically we have two type of application. The first one is the gas sensor. Gas sensor, definitely we need our graphene or our reduced graphene oxide to be in a kilo ohm. Okay, but for our second application, which is the biosensor, we don't have to make our graphene oxide, our reduced graphene oxide in the range of kilo ohm. So we did reduction. First, we do the chemical reduction. We are using natrium boron hydrate. And then the second reduction method, we use the thermal annealing. Okay. So some of the application, we just use natrium boron hydrate, and some of the application, basically we call it a double reduction. The natrium boron hydrate reduction and the thermal reduction. So this is, if you look at into the functional groups there, this is before the reduction and this is after reductions. So once we have completed the reduction process, so we do the electrical measurement and double reduction process, and then we do the electrical measurement. So basically we hit our sample first at 200 degrees C for 1 hour, and then we increase into 3 hours at the same temperature, which is 200 degrees C. And then we fabricate a thin film of reduced graphene oxide on top of our silicon substrate. And then we measure the resistance in the range of a kilo ohm across different concentration level. So based on our thin film, because of most of our applications is on graphene thin film on silicon substrate. So that's reason why we have to have a basic information in terms of the electrical conductivity in terms of the resistances based on the thin film on top of our silicon substrate. So what we believe there, this is a point where we reach the population region or population conductivity. Means that starting from here up until here, at the concentration less than 0.05 milligram per milliliter, which is a very, very small amount of reduced graphene oxide, we believe that this regime is a 2D regime where the resistance is quite high. So once you increase the concentration of the solution that we get before we produce the thin film structure, it turned into a 3D regime where it reached the percolation conduction. Okay, so this is basically the area. These are basically the concentrations that we have to focus on for our applications. Okay, so for this particular SDG number 3, which is good and healthy well-being. So we have the first application is the gas sensor. So in this type of devices, which is the gas sensor, basically we wanted to detect nitrogen dioxide gas. So most of our air pollutions, apart from monoxide, apart from SO2, apart from ammonia, we have a high percentage of nitrogen dioxide in our environment, in our air environment. So that's the reason why we produce our graphene oxide, where we wanted to detect the nitrogen dioxide. Currently, we have a metal oxide semiconductor and solid electrolyte. This is a commercial gas sensor. Okay, but the problem with the commercial gas sensor is it needs to be operated at high temperature, which is more than 1,000. And then some of them is 800 degrees C. So it requires high temperature. And then they have a selectivity problem. And because of they need to be operated at high temperature, so it requires high power consumptions. When you need to constantly plug in, so your device become not portable. So this is a typical response. So basically we measure the response of nitrogen dioxide towards our graphene gas sensor based on the resistance changes. Okay. And then we have tested at room temperature, and then we also have tested at 200 degrees C temperature. So this is basically the mechanism. What is happening when you expose our graphene-based gas sensor into nitrogen dioxide, and we also expose our graphene gas sensor into ammonia. So this is basically the mechanism. So basically, when you expose to the nitrogen dioxide, your RGO basically tend to lose the electrons into the nitrogen dioxide. And then the resistance become lower, because we believe that based on the literature, our reduced graphene oxide is a p-type materials. So when they losing the electron, the majority carrier is your holes. So that's the reason why your resistance become lower and the conductivity become increased. So basically, our gas sensor are solving the problem of metal oxide semiconductor and solid electrolyte gas, the commercial gas sensor. How? First, our gas sensor here basically operate at room temperature. Okay, And the second one, because of we can be operated at room temperature, so it just required a small amount of voltage and current just to turn on the device, just to turn on the circuit here. Okay, so we don't have to plug in constantly our device into the power outlet. So we just use a battery. So because of that, we can bring our gas sensor into wherever environment that we wanted to detect. And this is the circuit that we construct. So that circuit basically we install underneath the sensor here, underneath the monitor here. This is basically our sensor. The black one is the graphene oxide, reduced graphene oxide. The gold one here is our gold electrode. And this is the monitor where it will read the nitrogen dioxide gas, and then it will give the information to the user. So the second one is basically we use our reduced graphene oxide in order to detect the breast cancer cell. We all know that not only in Malaysia, not only in Indonesia, but the rest of the world, the most dangerous cancer is a breast cancer. So that's the reason why we choose breast cancer detection using our own graphene. Okay, so basically what our graphene can do. So this particular application, we just partially reduce our graphene oxide. Dr. Moderator, you can stop me whenever my time is up, okay?
We have 5 more minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Because I forgot to time my talk. Thank you very much. So this is what our reduced graphene oxide can do. So for your information, basically we just partially reduce graphene oxide for breast cancer detection. Okay, why? Because the structure of the graphene, and then the second one, the functional groups. Okay, so that's why I said before, some of the application we do the double reaction, but some of the application we do the partial reaction. And then the second one, based on the literature, the graphene oxide basically can target, and at the same time, it can inhibit the development of the breast cancer cell. So in this study, basically we vary first the pH level of the graphene oxide that we use, and the second one we vary the concentration and the pH level of the graphene oxide that we use. Okay, so the breast cancer cell, we call it MCF7. So if you look at here, the black round shape here is your breast cancer cell inside our blood. So first, we vary the pH. So we have a two type of pH. Sorry, we have three type of pH level, 5, 6, and 0.1. And then we vary different concentration of the graphene oxide that we use first to detect and hopefully to treat. Okay, so this is so we have two parameters, the pH and concentration, and then we have two mechanisms in order to study. First, the cell morphology, and the second one is the electrical changes, electrical conductivity changes. Okay, so first, this is the cell morphology if you observe under the high power microscope. This is a normal this is a breast cancer cell without the treatment with graphene oxide. Okay, so we treat for 24 hours and we treat for 48 hours. So this is the untreated, means that the original breast cancer cell without graphene oxide treatment. And if you look at here, the number of cell basically decreased when we treat with different concentration or different pH of graphene oxide. This is pH 5, pH 6, and pH 7. 5, 6, and 7. So means that by treating breast cancer cell at 24 hours and 40 hours, we basically can inhibit, or we basically can stop the development of breast cancer cell. And then we also did the electrical characterization, where basically we have, I just take one example because of the time constraint. So basically we have the untreated sample, means that MCF7 only, the breast cancer cell only. And then we vary the concentration at 24 hours treatment and 48 hours treatment. So each of the 24 hours and 48 hours in treatment, and each of the concentration, we measure the resistance of those cancer cells. Okay, so we use IDE, interdigitated electrodes. So basically we drop our graphene oxide on inside the breast cancer cell, inside a petri dish, and then we leave it for 24 hours and 48 hours. So after that, we take our samples and we drop on top of our interdigitated electrode, the device that we fabricate in our lab. And then after that, we measure the resistance. So if you look at there, this is the resistance before we treat with RGO, NGO, and then this is the resistance of different concentration after we treat with GO and RGO. So you can see the difference in terms of the kilo ohm, in terms of the resistance changes here. Okay, so at the end of this study, so but bear in mind, this is just a preliminary study. The study is still ongoing. Now we have moved into a different type of breast cancer cell, not only MCF7, but we also have a different type of breast cancer cell. And then we also study on the breast cancer stem cell, means that the cell before it grow into a breast cancer cell, we call it stem cell. So if we can successfully detect the stem cell before it grow into a breast cancer cell, means that we can detect as early as possible, because normally the breast cancer cell, the patient can see the effect of the breast cancer cell when they are in stage number 3 and stage number 4. So we are targeting basically to detect as early as stage number 1 and stage number 2. So that's the reason why we wanted to detect on the stem cell of the breast cancer cell. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much for Professor Mahidin for very interesting lecture. So in general, the topic that has been delivered by Professor Mahidin is about the green materials, which is from a palm trunk, yeah, as the application on the electronics such as biosensor and also detection of breast cancer cell. Okay, so thank you very much for all speakers. So for the next agenda is a discussion session. So for the participant who want to ask question, you can drop your question to the link provided in the chat box, or you can just directly send your question through the Dropbox, and other way you can just raise hand directly and ask to the speaker. Is there any question from the participant? Okay, so maybe while waiting the participants' question, I have a question to Professor Mahidin. So I saw in your slide, maybe just I want to see the data for the Raman of a graphene oxide. Raman result in a graphene oxide.
Yeah, sure. Let me share the screen.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Yes.
So from a figure D is the result of Raman spectroscopy for the synthetic process. Is it right?
Yeah, this one is a commercial graphene oxide.
And the
This one, the graphene oxide that we produced.
okay. So
Yeah.
is that silicon there? So
Yeah, because before we do the Raman, so
uh-huh.
we drop our graphene solution on top of silicon substrate. So
Okay.
that's why the Raman can, capture the silicon peak there.
So it's not from the sample.
No, it's not from the sample, it's from the substrate. Yeah, sorry about that.
Okay, thank you very much.
I should get rid of that.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a question. Let me check the question form. Okay, we have question from Khairul Anam from ITS, from physics engineering ITS. So his question is, for now, I have the research about aluminum alloy to battery storage renewable. Aluminium as electrode and liquid electrolyte. So he used aluminum as electrode and he used the liquid electrolyte. How to make the particle composition to more higher density and what material to alloy with aluminum is sustainable. So maybe this is can be answered by Professor Darminto related to energy storage.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I think that is for me it is still unclear what kind of aluminum battery you are studying. It means that it is aluminum air battery or another type of battery. So from the intensified concern to make the electrodes, you can with the high density, at least that you have to synthesize from the aluminum in the nano-size particle, and then by applying the very high pressure, like in dyes, and you can achieve the very high density. But in fact, that for the electrode, let's say using carbon and so on, I think it is not necessarily to make a high density electrode, and even that you still make some pore and some cavity to quad the ion diffusion during the electrode. But I'm not so clear what type of the battery you are studying. That's all what I can answer. Thank you.
So maybe Khairul Anam, you want to respond the answer from Professor Darmintos. You want to answer what specific battery do you study for now? What kind of aluminum?
Okay, thanks for the attention. For now, I have take the thesis about the make use the aluminum alloy to the electrolyte, electrolyte and electrode for the battery like this. So I cannot to find the material alloy. What is sustainable to join with the aluminum like this? To higher the density of the particle and then the conductivity and the special etc. Like this. Maybe like this, Mr. Daminto. Thanks for the regards.
Okay, thank you. You need to browse from the reference what kind of elemental, let's see, any metallic element to make the alloying with aluminum. Let's see, I don't know if it is fit, let's say for the copper, nickel, and so on. But if you synthesize this kind of alloying, you need probably it can be fabricated by powder process or with the casting. So it is depend on what kind and specific properties of this alloy you have to fabricate. Okay, sorry, I think there's no idea for me to give the variable suggestion. Thank you. I'm sorry.
Okay, so thank you very much for the answer from Professor Dr. Darminto. And the next, maybe there is someone raising his or her hand. Enda Grimonia.
Okay, so I have a question for Mr. Darminto. So first, as you have said on the presentation, you said that the RGO has better physical properties than the graphene oxide, but when you show the XRD result, as it shows the interlayer distance, right? That the XRD, that the interlayer distance from the RGO is shorter than the graphene oxide. So what makes the reduced graphene oxide has better electrical purpose first, and then second, okay, maybe that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Professor Darminto. Please, time is yours to answer the question.
Yes, thank you for your questions. But I'm sorry that this not so clear for me or voice because it sounds intermittent, and if I didn't got mistake that your question is about the reduced graphene oxide and graphene oxide as long as from the XRD analysis. Is that true?
I'm asking about the result of the XRD. The RGO shows that it have a shorter interlayer distance from the XRD result than the graphene oxide. Well, what makes the RGO have better physical properties? But we know the entire distance supposedly shows better electrical purposes. Is that right or not?
Okay, thank you. So for the first attempt to check if the RGO and GO, according to the XRD spectra analysis, is that GO have the longer interlayer distance. So the diffraction peak of GO is around 10 degree. Whereas in fact that for RGO, there are two peaks around 23, 24 and 42, 43. And according to the oxygen content, the graphene oxide has much higher content of the oxygen, around 40 to I guess 50 to 60%. Whereas in fact from the RGO, the oxygen content is only less than teens, around 9 to 15 and so on. So according to the electronic and also electrical properties of the RGO, it is can be expected that there are a lot of many more electron or in the carrier in the reduced graphene oxide and in the graphene oxide. However, you need to check if the in detail study that if we have two kind of sample, let's say GO and RGO, and we have to check the oxygen content and also to compare the electrical conductivity, let's say, or other properties like maybe soft magnetic properties and so on. Yeah, things like that. And according to the Raman spectra, like Professor Mahidin presented before, that you can check the ratio between the defect peak and graphene peak, the D peak and G peak. And that's the identification of this is the GO or RGO or just graphene. Okay, I hope it's clear for you, and I'm sorry that I cannot give the satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for Ms. Enda for the question and Professor Darminto for the answer. We have another question here from, please wait, from Narendro Ariwisnu from ITS. So his question is, we can see technology development of a mobile handset or laptop software or hardware has increased exponentially, but not with its battery. So why do you think that the development of battery technology is slower than others component? Maybe Professor Darminto or Professor Mahidin can answer this question.
I think I will let Prof. Darminto to answer that.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Yeah, actually, we're still facing a big problem from the battery, and the battery and market they still have some problem. Yeah, and according to the capacity and in the shortage of the lithium availability and so on. So now the battery technology is still growing and growing, and we wait and see any kind of new battery technology like natrium ion battery, like dual carbon battery as I presented, and also aluminum air battery and so on. So a lot of battery technology now is developing. So if you said that probably in the electronic based semiconducting technology, now it is growing up very fast. But for the battery, for the current situation, it is still like this. So now you still use from the lithium ion battery, and the other hand, you can find some problem in the use of lithium ion battery. So I think this is why the battery technology is still growing. It's not as fast as the electronic devices development. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Professor Darminto. And maybe is there any additional comment from Professor Mahidin about development of battery? Why it's not developed in a good trend compared to other technology?
Thank you very much for the question and the moderator. So I think, well, I cannot comment too much on the battery side, but on the electronic parts. So the research has been going since 1940 plus in terms of development of the electronic devices, as I said, transistor and so on. So throughout that year, based on my understanding and my view, basically throughout that year, researchers are playing around with different types of materials. Starting from, they start with the gallium, and then they change into the silicon, and then now they have a 3-5 groups, which is a gallium arsenide, GaN on GaN, gallium on nitride, and so on. And then just recently they moved into carbon-based materials. They started with carbon nanotube and graphene. So the way that I look at it, because of the process technology, the process and the technology in terms of the equipment, the technology readiness in terms of the know-how for that particular electronic devices are there. So they just change the materials, that's all. So they make use of different types of properties of different materials. For example, as I said, silicon to carbon nanotube and then to graphene. So they just change the materials. But the technology, the process involved, the know-how, knowledge already there. But I'm not quite sure with the batteries because it's involved a lot of, I think, physics behind it. And then they have to tailor-made in order to change the materials. Hope that answered the question. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, is there any other question from the audience? Okay, there is a question, but maybe it can be answered from the committee, whether the participant can get the PowerPoints or files that have been presented in the seminar. Maybe later the committee will answer this question. So is there any question related to the topic that have been presented by the speakers? Okay, Mr. Astria, yes.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Dr. Fahmi, so my question will be for Dr. Mahidi or maybe Prof. Darminto as well. So my question is about can graphene technology be integrated into a standard silicon CMOS technology? So I'm imagining if it's possible to have, you know, a normal IC using silicon integrated with graphene. Is it possible? Just that's my question. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Can I answer it, moderator? Yeah, thank you, Dr. Irfan. It's been a long time that we met before. So to answer your question, the short answer is yes. But the long answer is we have to look into the technology readiness. The possibility is there. In fact, in 2 or 3 years ago, IBM and if I'm not mistaken, Intel, they already have a so-called the prototype transistor based on the graphene. And there are still a long way to go before graphene can replace silicon. But the problem with the silicon-based CMOS structure or CMOS devices is it comes to the end of life, you know, for the silicon. Because now the CMOS device becomes smaller, smaller, and smaller. Because we wanted to have a quick and faster switching speed, for example, in order to have a fastest or faster on off for your CMOS devices. So it's not doable with the silicon base. So in some point we have to move from silicon, even though silicon have served us for the past 20 or 30 years, but we have to move. So the only candidates, nothing better than that is a graphene. They have tried before, Fuji, Japan, they have tried, I think 5 or 6 years ago, they have tried using carbon nanotube, a single wall, just one single wall carbon nanotube from source and drain. They tried before, but when they wanted to turn into a commercial product, there are a lot of barrier. Means that first they have to change all the equipment, because the equipment that we have, $1 million plus US dollar equipment, price of the equipment that we have is silicon based. So in order to use that, we have to change all the equipment, not only the process, but not only the technology, but we have to change the equipment. So it involves a lot of cost, a lot of money. So I think that's the reason why. But when we go into the performance wise, graphene is a lot better if compared with the silicon-based CMOS. Graphene is a lot better, carbon nanotube not far behind. But the thing is, when they wanted to change into a graphene-based CMOS, so they have to change, as I said, first the process, and then the equipment, and then the know-how, means that the engineers, the technologists, so they have to change their mindset in order to change into that. I think that's the stumbling block. That's the bottleneck why they are reluctant. And then now, the current technology for the silicon still can be applicable for most of the applications, automotive, transportation, electronic based. It still can be usable. So that's the reason why. But I would predict in I would say 2040, I think they will move from silicon into a graphene base. Hope they answer.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pak Irfan and Professor Mahidin. Is there any other question from the audience? Okay, so maybe one question for Professor Mahidin from me. Yeah, so you explained that for the application itself, especially for the gas sensor, is it for nitrogen dioxide? And in general, is it specific only for nitrogen dioxide, or it can be employed to other gas?
Okay, thank you very much for the questions. So there are problems and issues for the graphene-based gas sensor. The one of the issues is basically the selectivity problem. So when you use a bare graphene, means that graphene only for a gas sensor, it can be sensitive to other gases. Yes, we have detected nitrogen dioxide and ammonia, but at the same time, when you apply your gas sensor into the open environment, it can also detect monoxide, can also detect the SO2, and also detect methane. So we call it a selectivity problem. So one of the solution that we can think of, and currently we are doing that, is by doing the surface functionalization with the graphene. Means that, for example, if we wanted to have our graphene-based gas sensor to be selectively for nitrogen dioxide only, so we have to functionalize our graphene oxide with zinc oxide. So if we wanted to make our graphene-based gas sensor to be only selected for ammonia, so we have to surface functionalization with aurum or silver or platinum.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for the answer. Okay, maybe the last question, is there any question from the audience? Okay, now. Okay, maybe if there is no more question because we have reached the limitation of time for the discussion. Is already 5:28 now. So maybe we can close today's lecture. So before I return the session to the Master of Ceremony, thank you again for Professor Dr. Darminto and also Professor Mahidin for a very nice talk, very nice lecture. I believe that all of the participants here can obtain new knowledge, especially about the green materials for some application like in energy and also storage, and also for the electronics as presented by the speakers. So thank you very much once again to the speakers, Professor Darminto and Professor Mahidin.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
So thank you. So since we have reached the time for since we have finished all of the presentation from the speakers, so I return the session again to the Master of Ceremony. Thank you very much. Sorry if during the seminar, there is a mistake for me as a moderator. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin, as well as Professor Dr. Danminto, for the excellent lectures today. And thank you as well to Dr. Fahmi Astuti for moderating this insightful session. Please give applause to our speaker and moderator by using the Zoom reaction feature. Furthermore, we would like to present a certificate awarding to our speaker and also our moderator today. This is the certificate presented to Professor Dr. Darminto as the speaker for today's guest lecture.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. And next, this is the certificate presented for Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you. Thank you,
very much,
Pranamito.
Professor.
Thank you.
And last, this is the certificate presented for Dr. Fahmi Astuti as the moderator.
Thank you very much.
Once again, thank you very much to Associate Professor Dr. Muhammad Mahidin and Professor Dr. Danminto for the very informative lectures. Thank you as well to Dr. Fahmi Astuti for moderating today's guest lecture series. Okay, before we end our session today, we invite all participants, as well as the honorable speaker and moderator, to take a group photo. To everyone, please open your cameras. Okay. Okay. Please, to all participants, please open your cameras. Okay, I will take the picture now. For the first slide, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, for the second slide, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, that is it for the group photo session. Now we finished the group photo. Then for the participants, please fill the feedback form through the link bit.ly/feedbackgls that you can also see in the Zoom chat room. The deadline for filling the feedback form is 1 hour after we finish this session. We want to remind you that the participants who will get the stamp are the participants who come on time, join this event until the end, and also to fill the feedback form. Before we close the event, we would like to remind all of you that next week we will not have lectures on Tuesday, but instead we have them on Wednesday with 2 streams. The first one, in stream 1, the topic discussed is biophilic cities, challenges and opportunities amid COVID-19, with speakers Prof. Shuhaida Ismail from University Teknologi Malaysia and Dr. Bambang Somargiono from ITS. Next, in stream 2, the topics discussed are flood-resilient approaches for sustaining water-based architecture and cultural heritage, and planning approaches for disaster mitigation and resilience with speakers Dr. Witya Pitunangpo from Naresuan University and Dr. Prananda Navitas from ITS. So make sure you don't miss another insightful guest lecture next week. Finally, we have reached the end of today's guest lecture series, and we sincerely apologize for any mistakes we may have made in presenting as Masters of Ceremony and Committee. I, Orizab, as MC, bids farewell. Good afternoon, and we will see you again at another GLS. Thank you to Professor Darminto, Professor Mahidin,
Pak
and
Darminto,
Dr.
Pak
Fahmi.
Irfan, terima kasih.
Thank you.
Terima kasih, terima kasih.
Jumpa lagi insyaAllah. Assalamualaikum.
Amin, amin. Insya Allah. Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi.
Thank you again, Professor Darminto, Professor Mahidin, Dr. Astria, and Bu Fahmi for today's insightful and interactive discussion. Let me end the meeting in 3, 2, 1. Thank you and see you again in the next GLS session.